Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the introduction. We have two objectives before us. One is the discussion of this session, and the other is to keep you awake post-prandial. I don't know which is the bigger one. But at the outset, I would like to pay my tributes to Mokshagundam Vishweshwaraya, whose birthday falls today, the famous engineer, September 15th, yes. And it is my pleasure to welcome the speakers, the dignitaries, and the august participants on behalf of the IMF. Coming in the wake of the recent commissioning of the indigenous aircraft carrier INS Vikrant, and as we heard this morning, other ships also, it's an opportune moment to review the shipbuilding scenario in India and identify means and ways on how to accelerate the progress. The government of India has highlighted maritime security as a key focus area, as is evidenced by various policy formulations, among which are SAGAR, an Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. Given the geopolitical developments in the region, it is imperative that India enhances its presence and capabilities in the maritime sector. As we have seen, Government of India has initiated several measures to promote indigenization. Inter alia, there is a Make 1 and Make 2 scheme, increase in FDI, enabling OEMs to get in, support for startups, reservation for MSMEs and small shipyards, defense industrial corridors, and technology development funds. Shipyards, in the previous session, during the question and answer session, it was raised to shipyards get orders for commercial ships. Now, this is an issue in India still. They are dependent mostly on military orders. Can the challenges be met through naval orders alone? The second thing is, in terms of if we have to address all the challenges which have been highlighted in the morning session and will continue to be highlighted in this session. If you look at the papers they will be speaking on. Scientific research and technical advancement is a field where India has been lagging behind. In comparison to China and United States, which boasted 1,096 papers and 4,217 researchers per million inhabitants, India had 156 researchers per million inhabitants as of 2018, which is much lower than the worldwide average of 1,500. And yet we say we are the third largest S&T graduates in the world. And even if you look at the number of articles published, we come in 6th page, not to speak of the quality of the articles. So that is a background that I would like to leave, share my thoughts. We have eminent speakers who have identified key areas that require attention: in-house design capability, ancillary industries, economies of scale, adherence to cost and delivery schedules, etc. They've also made critical recommendations to ensure that the Indian shipbuilding and indigenization capabilities gain strength. So without much further ado, we will just go to the speakers and ask them to share their papers and their talk. We start with Commodore Vineet Tiwari, Principal Director of Naval Design, IHQ, Ministry of Defense. He's a naval architect serving in the core of naval construction of Indian Navy. And as was discussed in the morning, since the entire biodata is available, I will not dwell too much on it. The floor is yours, Commodore.
Vice Admiral Pasricha, Captain Anand Dikshit, President IMF, Dr. Malini Shankar, the session moderator, a very distinguished audience, including eminent veterans and captains of the industry. At the outset, I must thank IMF for giving me an opportunity to speak on this very relevant topic, which is very close to my heart, being a professional naval architect working on design, construction, and repairs of naval ships for over 3 decades. In line with the theme of this seminar today, I'll be talking about the need for instituting necessary policy framework to revitalize shipbuilding in India. I'll begin with a disclaimer that the views expressed in this presentation and talk are the personal views of the author, that is myself and Commander Prashant. and do not reflect the official views of Indian Navy or MOD. Sorry, I think we started with a gap. The scope is as shown of my presentation. I'll briefly touch upon the Indian shipbuilding evolution, cite the Korean and Chinese shipbuilding growth story, and recommend measures to revitalize shipbuilding in India. I'll begin with a quick look at the typicality of shipbuilding industry. As has been cited before also, the shipbuilding industry is an industry of industries which has direct and indirect positive impact at a very large scale on almost all the other industries and sectors, such as Tier 1 and Tier 2 ancillary industry, logistics and IT services, and financial services, etc., with very large spin-offs in terms of employment generation. The shipbuilding industry, as we can see here, is also known as the mother of industries because of its multiplier effect on manufacturing ancillary industries and on account of its large-scale employment generation potential. It is an established fact that for the same turnover, the shipbuilding industry generates at least 3 times the employment generated by the heavy engineering industry. As the esteemed audience is well aware, the manufacturing sector of a country has a very significant impact on the economic growth of the country. If we glance through the history, we see that nations which evolved as major manufacturing hubs also evolved as major shipbuilding nations and economic powers. A few of the global shipbuilding leaders over the last century are highlighted on this slide. If you look at the shipbuilding industry in India, it also witnessed a period of unprecedented growth riding on the stimulus of global demand from 2003 onwards. A large number of shipyards, buoyed by possible business opportunities, made significant capital investment to scale up their infrastructure. This led to an increase in market share of Indian yards in terms of global orders from around 0.2% in 2002 to around 1.2% by 2007, which was further projected to go up to 7.5% by 2017. However, as we all know, the industry did not follow the growth path as projected. The global recession in 2008 led to large-scale cancellation of orders, and this, coupled with withdrawal of shipbuilding subsidies, led to a drastic slide in market share of Indian yards to a meager 0.01% by 2013. While subsequent to 2013, we could see recoveries in shipbuilding order book of some of the even smaller nations like Vietnam, Brazil, Taiwan, Philippines. However, our Indian shipyards could not catch up, and some of the major Indian yards that were appearing to have a healthy growth potential during the shipbuilding boom went out of business. This slide would appear familiar. As compared to merchant shipbuilding, the warship building industry in the country has been a major success. The genesis of Indian Navy's design organization, which has proved to be the cornerstone of our Atmanirbharta in naval shipbuilding today, has been amply highlighted in the inaugural and the keynote address. From a humble beginning in the 1960s, the Navy's in-house design organization has grown multifold and is currently capable of designing the most complex weapon-intensive platform, including an aircraft carrier. Very few nations in the world have developed and nurtured this capability. Till date, 19 platform designs ranging from small crafts in the beginning to world-class destroyers and aircraft carrier now have been produced, to which around 93 ships have been built indigenously. The Indian Navy has been driving the Atmanirbharta in modernization of its fleet through a clear vision and a robust long-term integrated perspective plan from which emerges our technology perspective and capability roadmap, as well as the indigenization plan. This long-term planning has ensured the sustenance and progressive growth of indigenous warship construction capability, as well as development of new technologies and advanced equipments for our future platforms. In the next few slides, I would like to project a glimpse of the growth story of the Korean shipbuilding capability. Korea did not have any systemized shipping or shipbuilding policy until the first 5-year economic development plan that was launched in 1962. Korea had in principle two alternative approaches to economic development. One was inward-looking, based on import substitution, and the other was an outward-looking development strategy emphasizing export and trade. The country's policy shift to an outward-looking strategy was fueled by powerful economic reasons, including poor availability of natural resources, small domestic market, and an abundant and well-educated labor force with relatively low wages. The Korean government developed shipbuilding as a strategic industry in successive 5-year economic development plans from 1962 to 1980. The first 5-year plan for 1962 to 66 focused on ship quality improvement plan and expansion of shipbuilding facilities. The second plan from 67 to 71 brought in Shipbuilding Promotion Act of 1967 and financing for shipyards through shipbuilding funds. The Shipbuilding Industry Promotion Plan in 1970 included raising of domestic supply rate of ships and developing standard designs for 10 ships. At the third 5-year plan focused on making shipbuilding as the strategic export industry and to enhance shipbuilding capabilities. In addition to the robust policy framework, the Korean government focused on building institutions such as Research Institute of Medium and Small Shipbuilders, Korean Marine Equipment Association, and Institute of Ocean Science and Technology, etc. The Korean government also developed shipbuilding clusters to encourage effective cooperation between the shipbuilders and the ancillary industries which were located close by. The government also funded research in cooperation with the Shipbuilders Association and provided credit facility to ship owners and loans to shipyard to ensure working capital requirements. Such priority to shipbuilding industry and measures instituted by the Korean government fueled the growth in the shipbuilding industry, making it a leading global ship exporter. So these are the things which we would need to do if we want to become an exporter of ships. Looking at the Chinese success story, China has become immensely competitive in commercial shipbuilding, bagging largest share of global orders today. The Chinese political leadership saw the potential in the shipbuilding industry for economic growth and employment and worked in the mission mode for over 40 years to reach the present levels. Their government invested heavily in scaling up indigenous shipbuilding capacity with creation of massive infrastructure like huge dry docks with very large crane capacities for dual use in commercial and naval shipbuilding, while also nurturing a vibrant and robust ecosystem around the shipbuilding yards for indigenous equipment manufacture, skilling of manpower, MOU with leading shipyards for infusing technology, creation of many universities and R&D institutions, etc. With fall in the global commercial shipbuilding demand, the complete paraphernalia has been smartly and gainfully leveraged by China to produce warships at an alarming pace with concurrent series production of large number of warships in many Chinese shipyards. The Chinese have evolved their shipbuilding policies with focus on profit retention reforms to make their shipyards sustainable in the long run. They have evolved policies for adoption of contract management system laying the ground for legislative and financial reforms. China has evolved 5-year plan dedicated to shipbuilding industry with an aim of doubling the market share by according strategic status to shipbuilding and employing various measures to sustain orders. The focus areas for Chinese shipbuilding policy is summarized in this slide. Sorry. Sorry. See, China has focused on financial reforms, advancements in science and technology, and development in manufacturing. The financial reforms have provided tax benefits, fund availability, and stabilized material costs. The message for India from case studies presented of Korea and China is that such capabilities require convergence in thoughts and action with holistic long-term vision and policy investments. The road to competitiveness can only come from pressures of commercial shipbuilding to meet global standards with consequent enhanced maturity of vendor base of localized OEMs and ancillary industry. As I mentioned earlier, shipbuilding has largest potential for job creation among manufacturing industries with simultaneous development of ancillary industries in the shipbuilding ecosystem. Greater prioritization for development of shipbuilding industry amongst manufacturing sector therefore needs no further emphasis. Of course, there are major challenges in way of boosting indigenous merchant shipbuilding due to the conflict of interest between shipping and shipbuilding industry, which needs to be addressed through strong legislative action on the highest priority to be able to generate domestic demand for shipbuilding. The cabotage law is a well-known thing which needs to be taken care of. Now, having discussed the importance of prioritizing the shipbuilding in the country, the need of the hour is to strongly reevaluate our policy initiatives in the sector to leverage our strength and invigorate our economy. It is important for us to grow our merchant shipbuilding along with naval shipbuilding to truly realize the required critical mass for capacity enhancement with consequent benefits of economy of state. This would truly be an encouraging sign for the local industry as seen in case of China and Korea. Toward this, we need to take actions in short, medium, and long terms, which I would highlight in subsequent slides. To begin with short-term measures, it is proposed to form an apex national authority on shipping and shipbuilding for synergic vision and policy making for promotion of indigenous shipping and shipbuilding under the PMO. This would facilitate coordination among intra-government bodies, formulation of long-term policies, evolution of MOUs, and long-term cooperation agreements between industry bodies and the shipyards. The shipbuilding is a capital-intensive business, and financial support for it is imperative to be given at right time. Therefore, innovative ways of funding of shipyards and providing tax incentives and GST rationalization need to be evolved. The legislative action for long-term consistent policy formulation is another essential aspect for growth of shipbuilding in the country. For shipbuilding to have a critical mass, we need to enforce building of all the coastal and inland vessels at Indian shipyards mandatory. Demand for shipbuilding can be generated by implementation of legislative norms to permit only Indian-built and Indian flagships to carry Indian cargo. We also need to create institutional bodies and agencies to consistently develop new methodologies for enhancement of shipbuilding in ever evolving scenarios. The efficiency and effectiveness of shipyards and industry need to be benchmarked to the global standards, and these benchmarks need to be progressively improved with time. Government should encourage partnerships among the public and private sector yards to increase the overall standard of the industry. And robust indigenous design strength would be the key to developing the domestic shipbuilding capability. Towards this, we need to strengthen our design houses through financial and other support measures. Finally, looking at the medium and long-term measures, we need, I think my slides are running ahead of me. Yeah, so we need to target self-reliance in commercial shipbuilding and ancillary industries. We need to strengthen support structure to make our shipyards competitive for exports so as to add volumes for shipbuilding. We need to set up specialized institutes for developing indigenous expertise and skill set for shipbuilding. And finally, we also need to invest heavily in concurrent development of shipping and shipbuilding infrastructure. With that, I have finished. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Commander A.M. Jafar Sirajuddin, who is presently posted at IHQ in the Ministry of Defense as Commander Marine Engineering. He is responsible for induction, management of engineering equipment and new construction vessels for the Navy. Floor is yours.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Indian Maritime Foundation for arranging this seminar and the opportunity. In my paper, Indigenous Shipbuilding and the Vendor Base for Future Technologies, I would like to delve upon reasons for delays in the Indian shipbuilding of iron projects, identify the challenges, and suggest some mitigating measures with respect to equipment induction process. Problem with taller people. The scope of the presentation is shown on the slide. We'll start with a brief introduction. My slides are behind me, sir. So we'll start with a brief introduction, list few key challenges, understand the capability of the ancillary industries, and subsequently explain the equipment induction process being followed in Indian Navy, and see few of the future technologies Indian Navy is looking for in the new component, and finally suggest some policy changes to enhance the efficiency of the whole process. The data given on the slide is known to most of the audience here. However, it is essential to reiterate that the industrial capability of a nation is linked to its shipbuilding prowess. Today, only 10% of Indian flagships are being built at Indian shipyards. However, the scenario is entirely different in case of ships being built for Indian Navy. Out of 38 ships presently under construction, 36 are being built at Indian shipyards. This excludes yardcrafts being built at various public/private shipyards. The capability of indigenous warship construction may be attributed to the Leander class frigates, which was built at 1960s. However, still there are delays being experienced in the ship construction. According to a 2015 report of Public Accounts Committee of Parliament, 4 reasons, as shown on the slide, has been identified as a major contributor to the slow pace of construction. In addition, another major challenge is the timely availability of the equipment post successful testing for onboard installation. This can be attributable to the availability of a mature, robust, and reliable vendor base who understand the naval requirements. The paper aims to identify the challenges and suggest mitigating measures in the development of the vendor base for future technologies in indigenous shipbuilding. The scan of the environment revealed 3 major areas affecting the move category of a warship. Most of the Indian shipyards lack in-house full design capability. This is presently being addressed by dependence on a foreign design house or design of warship design bureau. As brought out earlier, over 90 ships have been built to 19 class of ships designed by WDB. With complex propulsion system, a requirement driven by need for an efficient solutions, propulsion system integration has grown to be a separate vertical for today's warship. Thus, having an in-house PSA capability has become inescapable. Lastly, ancillary industry of the country is vastly underdeveloped. Out of the three major aspects brought out above, the present paper focuses on the development of the vendor base within the ancillary industry available in India. In order to develop the vendor base, three focus areas have been identified, which may help to improve the situation. First, vendors should have a clear understanding of the equipment qualification and induction process. Second, avenues made available by the government for induction of future technologies. And third, undertake few suggested policy changes to enhance the efficiency of the whole process. Over 60% of MOVE category equipment have been indigenous. However, few equipment are still being imported as shown on the slide. It is pertinent to note that these equipment affect the main propulsion of the ship. While diesel engine has been taken up for development under Make on Screen and firefighting system is being indigenized through DRDO, the efforts of indigenization of other equipment is still at nascent stage, largely due to lack of industrial capability within the country. New technologies under deliberation for induction are shown on the slide. It may be noted that few of these technologies are being actively pursued at IHQ MOD for development within the country. In order to indigenously develop the above equipment and technologies in India, there is a requirement for the industry to understand the envisaged capability, technical specifications, qualification standards, and testing procedures. Understanding the above by the vendor will enable him to accurately estimate the cost and time required to develop the equipment. It is also equally important for Indian Navy to unambiguously explain the envisaged capability with all the underlying requirements to the vendors during the induction process. It is pertinent to mention that the Indian naval ships are either built to classification society rules or built to IN specifications. IN specifications would include requirements such as given in defense standards, military standards, or standards promulgated by the professional directorates at IHQ. Further, as brought out by a previous speaker, the equipments are categorized into Cat A, B, C star, and C. The technical specifications are listed in the Statement of Technical Requirements approved by the IHQ and would invariably specify requirement of the equipment to meet the MIL standards or class rules. In case of equipment meeting class rules, special requirements such as limits of acceptable noise, vibration, and shock would be promulgated. Other functional and technical requirements will include the limiting dimensions, weight, material of construction, manufacturing processes, quality assurance procedure, inspection agency, acceptance test procedures, and factory acceptance trial protocols. Qualification standards of naval equipment will include some or all of the attributes shown on the slide. Equipment design and manufacturing should meet the requirements such as environmental conditions under which the equipment is required to perform its intended function, endurance test for more than 100 hours uninterrupted running as specified, tilt test at various angles, structured borne noise which may contribute to the overall URN levels of the platform, airborne noise, mechanical vibration limits, ability to withstand underwater shock, and any other type test as dictated by the standards. While ancillary industry in the country is capable of manufacturing most of the equipment to the specifications such as ISO or IACS rules, the equipment fails to qualify to be inducted into the service due to not meeting the qualification standards. Therefore, policies in existence and standards being followed are shown on the slide. It is prudent for the industry to ascertain these requirements once again during the technical negotiation committee meetings held with shipyard and IN reps. The type testing is undertaken in accordance with DEFSTAN 362 or extend DGQA policy letter. Structure borne noise is measured in 1/3 octave band above the first stage mounts, and MIL standard 1474 echo is followed for airborne noise and its limits. Mechanical vibration limits are as dictated by ISO 10816, and iron shock policy would be applicable for shock qualification of the equipment. As brought out above, there is scope for development of new technology indigenously by Indian ancillary industries. With focused impetus on PM's vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, Government of India has brought in various provisions through newly published Defence Acquisition Procedure 2020. Three major ways through which the technologies can be indigenously developed and inducted or make schemes: Technology Development Fund, also called TDF, and Innovation of Defence Excellence Challenges. The MAKE program, which is part of Make in India policy of the GOI, was first promulgated in DPP 2016. This program comprised of Make 1 and Make 2 schemes. A revision was then made in Chapter 3 of DAP 2020 to make the procedure simpler and more industry friendly, and was categorized into Make 1, which is partially funded by the government for the prototype development with assured bulk orders; Make 2, which is industry funded for prototype development with assured bulk orders; and lastly, Make 3, which is industry funded for prototype development through JVs or TOTs, that too with the assured bulk orders. A successful development of these schemes would result in acquisition from the developmental agency through by IDDM or by Indian route. The GOI announced setting up of a technology development fund in Union Budget 2014-15. The fund was set up in 2016 and have been allocated to DRDO under this scheme. Only Indian vendors are eligible for participation, and procurement would be made by Indian IDDM category. A nodal officer is nominated by IN for each project under TDF scheme as a member of project monitoring and mentoring group. Innovation for Defence Excellence was set up by MOD with funding under Defence Innovation Fund and managed by Defence Innovation Organization of MOD. The DIO has been constituted with Secretary DP as the chairman and VCNS as the member of advisory board to the DIO. So coming on to a few suggested policy changes. A few policy changes to ensure efficient vendor qualification and equipment induction are listed on the slide. A policy on comprehensive vendor qualification for each equipment is recommended to be formulated by the Naval Headquarters. The vendor qualification should be for a specified period of time, not more than 2 to 4 vendors, except in exceptional cases, should be qualified for an equipment in order to avoid proliferation of the equipment make and model. Further, successful completion of type testing and factory acceptance trials of the equipment is recommended to be an important prerequisite for vendor qualification to ensure only technical capable firms are qualified. On successful vendor qualification, a vendor compendium should be promulgated encompassing all equipment and vendors. For equipment which does not affect the fight capability, the vendor compendium may be published in public domain. Once finalized and promulgated, vendor compendium should be retained for a certain time period. Suggested time period for the retention of vendor base prior renewal or re-evaluation is 10 years. This will enable better equipment standardization in Indian Navy. Further, a common pool of vendors for supply of CAT Sea Star and sea equipment across all shipyards is recommended to be identified and disseminated to the shipyard. This will ensure continuous business to the MSME category firms, as CAT Sea Star and sea equipment primarily include yard materials and engineering components such as valves, reductors, bellows, gaskets, instrumentation, fasteners, etc. In turn, this will enable standardization across all IN platforms over a period of time and better prices for the shipyard due to increased quantity of production. Where feasible, the specification of the equipment need to be frozen prior conclusion of the shipbuilding contract. In case the same is not feasible, changes envisaged is to be indicated to the shipyard. Once frozen, no changes to the equipment specification unless affecting safety of men and material is to be promulgated. This will reduce the lead time for equipment supply and thereby shipbuilding timelines. A comprehensive assessment of equipment specification across iron platforms is the need of the hour. When not affecting the fighting capability of the platform, the equipment specification can be in line with marine or commercial standards complying to the IACS rules. Only those equipment which affect the fighting capability are to be built to iron or mill standard or defense standards. On completion of the assessment, equipment specifications are to be standardized across iron platform, irrespective of ship being built to either class or iron specification. That I come to the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander Sirajdan. Our next speaker is Captain Mainak Mishra, who is in the Naval Headquarters, responsible for all ongoing weapon and sensor maintenance issues, future projects, and weapon indigenization.
Admiral Pasticha, Captain Dikshit, moderator of the session, senior serving and retired officers present here, the representatives of the industry, ladies and gentlemen. This afternoon, I stand before you to speak on weapon indigenization in Indian Navy, challenges and way ahead. The scope of the presentation is as shown on the screen. To begin, amongst the three services, as brought out by Admiral Pasticha also, the Navy stands out due to its conspicuous success in platform-level indigenization. Lieutenant Commander Kalesh Mohanan wrote in an article in Indian Defence Review that a major objective of the 1969 to 74 Defence Plan was self-reliance in the field of warship design and warship production, and the aim was to conserve foreign exchange. Accordingly, the indigenous construction of frigates, patrol craft, submarines, minor war vessels, and auxiliaries was accepted. And in 1969, Naval Headquarters proposed to the government that a full-fledged Directorate of Naval Design be sanctioned. However, to the credit of early naval planners, two important milestones towards self-reliance in warship production had already been accomplished with the commencement of Naval Construction Cadre in 1951-52 and the establishment of Directorate of Naval Construction in 1962. As initially visualized, the Navy has achieved significant progress in past 5 decades, progressively moving from British Leander-class frigates to indigenously designed stealth frigates, destroyers, and even aircraft carrier. It needs to be mentioned here that platform indigenization is undoubtedly an exemplary feat, but reliance on foreign weapon manufacturers for providing them combat capability is something that requires attention. Our dependence on foreign weapon manufacturers makes us susceptible to supply chain issues, unilateral obsolescence, foreign exchange variations, sanctions, etc., and impinges on our strategic autonomy. To put things in perspective, over the next 15 minutes or so, I would try to explain the need for weapon indigenization, elucidate its current state, highlight complexities in the process, bring out recent institutional initiatives, and at the end, put forth some implementable recommendations. Let us understand the need for weapon indigenization first. Needless to mention, at this August gathering, India is heavily dependent on imports, especially for energy requirements. To put things in perspective, between July 21 and July 22, India's exports rose by 2.14% to $36 billion, but the imports increased by a whopping 43.6% to $66 billion. Another related statistic, which has been quoted earlier from CIPRI, brings out that India spent $331 billion on military between 2016 to 20, 2.6% of GDP, and was the second biggest importer of arms after Saudi Arabia. This is the condition despite 33% drop in the arms imports between 2011 to 16 and 2016 to 20. For an import-dependent country like ours, one of the foremost ways to reduce trade deficit is by reducing import bill and increasing defense exports. In fact, Israel should be an example in this regard, as defense exports finance the country's defense research and development to a considerable degree. Supply chain is a word that became very popular during COVID as everyone realized its importance. A study by Deloitte pointed out that over 200 of the Fortune 500 firms have a presence in Wuhan, the ground zero of COVID-19. The lockdowns in Wuhan and later in Beijing and Shanghai entirely affected the supply of high-density electronic circuit boards, electronic displays, and precision castings. Though post-COVID, there have been some attempts to shift manufacturing base, it bears consideration that China took 20 years of government-driven initiatives to build a local base capable of supplying electronic components, auto parts, chemicals, and drug ingredients. We also have been particularly affected by Russia-Ukraine conflict. Our reliance on Russia for military hardware and equipment upgrades is common knowledge. However, it also needs to be understood that when Russia is embroiled in a conflict, their OEMs would indubitably prioritize supply of military hardware to their own forces. Acquisition of weapons and sensors from foreign OEMs is a vicious cycle. The proprietary interfaces necessitate that if you import a missile, you also import its FCS, reference systems that provide its ship data, its test equipment, calibration setup for test equipment, and repair and support facilities for the FCS missile and all other supporting systems. Every time there is a need to upgrade the system to manage obsolescence or life extension, you per force approach the same OEM, making the service completely dependent on a foreign OEM. In addition, even in TOT, foreign OEMs do not share critical technologies and activities. For these, dependence continues despite local manufacturing. Technology is the basic foundation on which use cases are determined and weapons are developed. Denial of critical technologies is a convenient method used by advanced economies to stifle developing nations. Stuxnet was a small 500 KB computer worm which targeted Iranian nuclear centrifuges in a nuclear fuel refinement system. It proved for the first time that computer virus can target industrial automation systems. Unless the hardware and software are locally manufactured and developed, it is extremely difficult to ensure that computer malware has not been introduced into the system by inimical elements. Having understood the need, now let us get an overview of how the Navy approaches weapon indigenization and what has been accomplished so far. Considering its specialized nature and complexities involved in the weapon indigenization, weapon indigenization is the charter of DWE, unlike all other indigenization that are steered by DOI. At the command level, command weapon indigenization committees are there. They meet on a quarterly basis to review the indigenization projects. At IHQ level, inputs from the CWICs are collated into an annual weapon indigenization plan. Once promulgated, the release of funds and monitoring of projects is taken up under AWIP by the DWE. To accelerate indigenization, Indian Navy came up with the first indigenization plan called INIP in 2003, which enunciated its requirement of indigenous equipment for next 15 years. The INIP was revised in 2008 and then again in 2015. As brought out in INIP 2015, Indian Navy has embarked upon indigenization through two routes. First one is R&D through the DRDO, and second is transfer of technology with industry partners. Some of the major success stories as far as weapon systems are concerned are surface-to-surface missiles, surface-to-air missiles, MR guns, CR guns, torpedo tube launchers, rocket launchers, gun FCS, as has already been highlighted by the Vice Chief. In addition, these are the systems that have already been inducted. There are several weapon systems that are at various stages of trial and induction. Despite the aforementioned successes, there are some impediments in weapon indigenization, which have prevented us from achieving greater self-reliance. The first is piecemeal indigenization. In the Navy, system-level indigenization is the responsibility of IHQ, while subsystem and module-level indigenization is command charter. Prudence dictates that indigenization be progressed in a phased manner, wherein critical modules or those with low MTBF are indigenized first. But in a weapon industry that thrives on use of proprietary interfaces and software and hardware locking of LRUs, any such endeavor is bound to meet the disapproval of the foreign OEMs. There have been some instances of these OEMs when called in for technical assistance, attributing blame on indigenous LRUs for failure despite there being no connection. The second is the cost factor. There's a need to appreciate that there is a significant difference between the economics of what we presently produce and what we aspire to produce. Our aspiration is to join the big players producing high technology systems. But in the absence of sufficient design and technical skills, the cost of independently developing such high technology systems are higher by orders of magnitude due to high requirements for precision, miniaturization, and materials, expensive testing and development facilities, and export controls. The next factor is the production quantity. Considering the number that the Navy has, it is difficult and in some cases impossible to manufacture armaments in large enough numbers to benefit from economies of scale. Major platforms are acquired in dozens, but never in thousands. If the technology is being developed for the first time, development cost further spikes unit cost. As Mr. Dhruv Jaishankar termed in an article for Brookings, the defense sector is a monopsony. Since Indian defense is the only customer, this leads to further market distortions. Last factor that I would like to highlight today is procedural complexities. Commodore Anil Jaisingh had conveyed the sentiments of private sector when he wrote, defense manufacturing has been open to private sector 2 decades back, but it has been largely restricted to a network of DPSUs, which work directly under the Ministry of Defense's DDP, creating a perception, and not without reason, of an us versus them syndrome, where the us, that is the defense PSUs, have always enjoyed a playing field that is heavily skewed in their favor. In addition to the perceived bias, there are problems of long-winded acquisition procedures, acceptance delays due to non-availability of platforms, and associated issues with timely payments. Government has taken several initiatives recently to promote indigenization. I will just rush through because they have been covered several times since morning. The indigenization list, there are 3 indigenization lists, positive indigenization lists, which have been promulgated by the services. There are 2 indigenization lists which have been promulgated by the DPSUs. There is a Srijan portal which has been which is there available in the open domain for real-time updates on the activities that are being done by the DPSUs. The changes to make procedure have been covered by the previous speaker. The Buy Global Manufacture in India new category Make 3 has been introduced. The incentives for the MSMEs have been covered, the IDEX scheme, and the DDP has approved 498.8 crores for the next 5 years. Reservation for MSMEs and small shipyards, that part has been covered. The other incentives to the industrial sector, as has been covered by the moderator also. The industrial licensing policy has been simplified. The FDI has been increased from 49% to 74%. Defense industrial corridors have been established at UP and in Tamil Nadu. So several initiatives have been taken by the government in the past few years. So having seen the distance traversed to date and the initiatives that have been taken by the government recently, I think that the way ahead towards self-reliance will require the industry as supplier and the Navy as customer to march ahead in sync. In the next few slides, I'll put forth our expectations from industry, and then I'll cover some of the way the services can catalyze the process at our end to remove the existing bottlenecks, enhance synergy, and make indigenization more rewarding. Starting with our expectations from the industry. First is the need to absorb technology. The Indian startups are technologically sound, but weapon indigenization, especially when it involves piecemeal indigenization, is extremely challenging. The technical documents in many cases are incomplete and maybe a poor translation from the original language. The technology in many cases is obsolescent, and the only operational equipment may be on ships, which cannot be disassembled due to operational reasons. In such circumstances, the industry needs to have the capability to understand and replicate the underlying technology. The present times are a wonderful opportunity to form collaborative partnerships. The government's relentless push for Make in India and the stand of the services to restrict imports has convinced the foreign OEMs that the import restrictions are not temporary. So they are willing to collaborate and invest in India through the FDI route or as part of intergovernmental agreements. Indian industry should utilize the opportunity, as there is a lot of scope in local manufacturing of spares of these foreign origin equipment and in their obsolescent upgrade. The next point is the hiring of the people who understand defense services, especially service requirement. Commander Anand had brought out this point. It is pertinent to note that over 60,000 personnel retire from services every year. The number is likely to increase further in 4 years when the batch of recruits under the Agnipath scheme superannuate. This is a huge talent pool that can be gainfully utilized. Further, the company and cognizant of defense requirements, which are regularly put out in the open domain. Also, there is a need for greater engagement through forums such as CII, SIDM, DEF Expo, and IDEX. Such engagements also provide us a perspective on innovative and disruptive technologies that are there in various domains. We had discussed earlier about the perception that the playing field is skewed in favor of DPSUs. Today, there is a growing realization that while standardization eases inventory management and skill acquisition processes, lack of competition gives rise to the monopolistic tendencies. There's a need for the private sector to get into core DPSU strength areas such as fire control, radars, launcher mechanisms, medium caliber guns, etc., to create competition. We understand that it is impossible to indigenize 100% of the subsystems and modules. However, the industry should judiciously validate supply chains while sourcing their requirements. There have been instances of delivery periods being unduly extended in light of the global chip shortage. Thus, it would be prudent for the industry to diversify supply chains, especially for critical components. Coming to Indian Navy and how we can accelerate the process of indigenization, Indian Navy has been planning in advance various technologies and equipment to be indigenized. These equipment and requirements are published in the form of IDEX challenges and the Indian Navy indigenization plan. IN should continue to crystal gaze futuristic requirements and disseminate the same in open domain so that the industry can prepare itself. Also, there have been instances in the past where industry has brought out that the QRs of these services are unrealistic. While there is an expectation that the product being designed and developed should be technologically advanced, it should also be ensured that the QRs enable healthy competition between the bidders. There is a need for greater engagement with product designers and developers, especially at the initial stage of the product development lifecycle. Indian Navy has created a Center for Indigenization and Self-Reliance at Coimbatore for industry outreach. A similar specialized center in respect of weapon indigenization for handholding during initial stages of development is the need of the hour. Weapon indigenization is a challenging process. Managing such projects requires thorough knowledge and understanding of acquisition procedures, financial regulations, underlying technology, all of which need time. Frequent transfer of service personnel to cater to career milestones affect the progress of these projects. We should, as far as possible, try to maintain personnel in such critical billets for longer durations. Since weapon indigenization is an extremely niche field, trials and testing require extensive involvement of the services. Even if a product is successfully developed, the only way it can be confirmed is by undertaking trials, which is possible only in reference systems available within naval yards or in operational systems on board ships. Thus, Navy needs to facilitate expeditious trials and testing of the products that have been developed. Brought out so many times here is the smallest service, and requirements, especially in terms of numbers, are not comparable to Army and Air Force. There is a need on part of HQIDS to create numbers by pooling requirements of the services as well as Coast Guard to make indigenization process financially viable for the industry. To conclude, India has accomplished major milestones in the field of platform indigenization. In recent years, some of the most advanced naval platforms that the world has ever seen have been built in India. However, weapon indigenization has not kept pace. Complete and comprehensive indigenization, including weapon indigenization, is sine qua non as it impinges on the strategic autonomy, economic stability, and national security. Needless to mention, Indian government and industry are seized of the matter, and reasonable progress has been achieved in recent years. Success stories notwithstanding, weapon indigenization poses several challenges, such as complex technology, inadequate documentation, and economies of scale. Incumbent government has taken certain important initiatives to accelerate the process of indigenization, which have been highlighted earlier. To take the initiative forward, it is imperative for the industry and the Indian Navy to synergize efforts and jointly realize the vision of self-reliance in the field of weapon indigenization. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Mishra. So we will just continue in the meanwhile with Commodore Sujit Samadhar, who is with us. He is
He has a unique distinction of having worked in the government and in the private sector as well as the military IO. So, so yours,
Good afternoon. I hope this is working. No. Maybe it's working now. Yes. This is one of the first technical challenges we always face, and not unique. I was Bashija, sir, Captain Dixit, Dr. Mrs. Vani Shankar, good friends and colleagues. It's my very pleasant duty to be here with you to share some views on energizing India's shipbuilding industry. Quite a bit of this stuff is coming from the work we've done at PTIO and subsequent discussions that we had on really energizing the shipbuilding industry through a focused Ministry of Shipping project. So I'm going to bring some of those ideas that came from there into a condensed presentation. There will be many questions, I know, but so I have to begin with the customary slide. Okay. As far as background in shipbuilding is concerned, we have deliberated. In practice, the shipyards are not doing too well. 5 are under NCLT. There's a case trying the NCLT further, not improve our stuff. But we are already building aircraft carriers, and we have a capacity to build 240,000 ton TWTs. But we import bulk carriers, LNG carriers, containers, car carriers, we don't make them. And we're losing about $1.5 billion annually due to ship repair opportunity of several thousand jobs, which has now come up after the IMO protocol. Now we have the Maritime India vision, which was promulgated, and just recap. I've just taken one slide out of that document on the priority initiatives. Increase domestic shipbuilding by 2025, increase domestic ship repair by 2025, developing ship repair clusters by 2025.
Slide changes.
slide change. It's not changing.
I've changed.
Yes, because
Yeah.
Okay, here we are. So these were some great statements made in the MIV 2025, and the term that we used to use to describe these statements were called motherhood statements. You know, which are just statements hanging in the air with no idea as to how we would get there. But apparently we have moved somewhere. But now the ground truth is what? Ground truth is that we are not in the top 25 shipping economies. We rank 18th in terms of flag registration, rank 19th in terms of ownership of the world fleet. We were the largest ship recycler till we introduced our MIV policies, and we are not in the top 20 shipbuilding nations. This is the ground truth. But looking at it positively, what it tells us is that we have got plenty of headspace to grow. China has grown somewhere, Korea has grown somewhere. They're probably peaked out. We have a lot of headspace to grow, and if we work on it together, we will get there. So let's look at the approaches to shipbuilding. We spoke about it in two cases. I've taken two case studies, one of the Shipping Corporation of India and the other of the Navy. What happened to the Shipping Corporation of India? We converted the Shipping Corporation of India as a buyer's money. This slide tells you that they ordered 50 ships on every shipyard in the world except Indian shipyards, one CSL and one HSL. So they missed out on indigenous capability. They didn't build any capacity. They didn't build any skills, and their loss of foreign exchange in Indian jobs. And the second part of the story is not only that they did not build ships in India, the STI does not undertake any repairs of the ships in India for a very important reason, because if who gets foreign loss, then they are posted abroad. So there is a natural disincentive to do anything in India, particularly if you are going to be stuck in Cochin or being in Dubai, getting a ship. I think the choice would be in Dubai and get your $450 a day there than be in India and not get it. So this is something that the Shipping Corporation of India's strategic outlook has been. On the other hand, a very proud naval officer, former officer, we, the Navy, built to the strategy, and we are a builder's Navy. That was a buyer's Navy, we are a builder's Navy. This slide tells you we have heard lots of things on this. But basically, it was the coming together of the buyer, the builder, the user, and the government in a very focused way, which created capability, which created capacity, which created skills. And this is what is showing the benefits of our strategy over the last few decades. So now looking at the merchant side, ultimately this whole thing depends on cargo. As far as coastal shipping is concerned, we are losing about we carry about $400 billion of cargo, 2021 prices by sea, but our merchant ship was 1.27% as mentioned. But coastal sharing shipping only constitutes 6.4% the share of the modal share of our transportation. And out of that, only 54% is carried by Indian ships, and just a 5% modal shift of cargo from road trade to coastal shipping would save $283 million, apart from huge savings in energy and emissions, which is a very important parameter today as far as sustainability is concerned, as far as the government is concerned, and its commitments at CO25. Of course, there is a lot of debate on the cabotage laws. I don't support it at all, but we need to do that because we don't have ships to carry our own cargo. There are other challenges as well, and we have discussed that at some length about first mile and last mile connectivity, and sometimes in between as well. So there are those little gaps, but we'll have to work together to overcome them. But this is the state of coastal shipping. If you look at exempt shipping, at one time, Indian ships carried almost 46% of Indian cargo. Today we are down to 7.5%, and we pay about $58 billion to foreign ships to carry our cargo. I don't think this is a great idea. And of course, we are the fourth largest consumer of oil, 4% of the world share, fifth largest importer of petroleum products, and we have only 1.5% of total tankers. We are the fifth largest importer of petroleum gas and only have 0.3% of total gas carriers. We have 7.1% of limestone, 51.3% of granite stones, but we own only 1.5% of bulk carriers, 1.8% of iron ore, and 80% goes out from various destinations, but we don't build bulk carriers again. In addition, we also import 253 million tons of coal. In the last time that I spoke on this somewhere else, we had 565 shipments of coal coming into Vizag for RINL, of which only 36 cargoes came from Indian ships. The balance 500 cargoes came from foreign ships. So that is the kind of dependence that we are having on imports as well. Fertilizers is a very important constituent of our entire economy. We import 5 million tons of it. Increasingly, we are going to be importing ammonia, and we don't have ammonia gas carriers. They're specialized ships. They're not even building them as yet. So we need to sort of face these facts upfront and see what solutions we can emerge. The strategic implications, of course, are very clear. We must move to multimodal transportation for the benefits of coastal shipping is well known. I'll show a slide on that subsequently. And we all need to have one integrated ecosystem. This has been discussed at length, and this we emphasize at that point. Isolated and independent schemes are not optimal, and outsourcing cargo to foreign shipping compromises security of trade and access to commodities and markets. We're seeing this increasingly, particularly in the regime where there are sanctions and there are denial of trade. So in those times, you must have your own hull to bring your own cargo and access the markets that India has to access to, so that our economy grows. Of course, there are other aspects of this job process, etc. And the more important requirement is we have to work together in the intermodal transportation to reduce our logistics costs to the exorbitantly high of 14% to 10% if we have to become competitive in our goods. There's of course the economic ramifications. These are some records, something that we've spoken about. The investment multiplier is 11.2, but 2. Employment multiplier is 6.4. Turnover multiplier is 4.2. These are huge numbers to build up the economy, and they should show up in any discussion that we do. The potential has been pulled out by a KPMG report. You can see this on the slide. But we need to understand that there are strategic, economic ramifications for the growth of the shipbuilding industry in India. So how do we do this? First and foremost, the proposal is to have Atmanirbhar vantage. That means we must carry our own trade assets. That's the first model. And there's no point building ships, you are not assured the cargo. So the first requirement is we must have a plan by which we can ensure long-term assured cargo. And that can also come about if we can get rid of cabotage in a planned way. So that's the first point, Atmanirbhar vantage. Secondly, we have spoken about credit. The second point is that we must have stability. Only going to give us cash. We need to find ways and means of creating those banking systems that will give us low cost credit towards capacity building and sustainability of the shipping industry together with our shipyards. The various models that we show on the slide. With these two together, we come to our network one. That will only come through if we can have a stop the silo-based approach. There's only one chat is not giving out all the answers. That's not going to work. We need a 15-year shipbuilding plan. We need to have a demand aggregation versus standard designs. Vineet and me have been discussing standard designs for merchant ships, around 3 basic hull designs. We must leverage the existing expertise. We have a lot of expertise with many people. I think Vineet, you are going to leave in another year or so. At the age of 56, he's going to be available. You can please tap him, so you won't get a better designer than him. At least the country should not lose these standards. I mean, people who now retire at the age of 56, that's not fair. They should be absorbed into some system where their skills can be brought as designers. And not a pure economic viability model, but a strategic necessity. I've highlighted this specifically because about 5 years ago, the case for LNG carriers had come up. You remember that. And at that time, the government, and including the Niti Aayog, had shut it down because it was not considered viable. So whether a pure economic approach to shipbuilding should be allowed or not is something that we should understand. And no country in the world has moved to achieve shipbuilding standards without government support. In India also it is required. Unless the government steps in to look at things from a not a pure balance sheet item, but as an off the balance sheet item in terms of the benefits that you can draw from these programs, Atmanirbhar 4.1 will not happen. So firstly, let's look at how do we get the cargo. We need 4 people. We need the janitor, and at the moment we already have many of the ministries who use shipping companies to transport their own cargo. Ministry of Port, Ministry of Fertilizers, Ministry of Public Sector Enterprises, the Road Transport Highways get hundreds of people, food trains. Need to get them together. The public sector enterprises, the Central Warehousing Corporation, the Food Corporation of India, many of them, they're all shipping cargoes, but they're all shipping these cargoes on foreign ships. So I think we just need to get them together to do that. Then after that, we need to aggregate it. Let's understand what numbers look like. I'll put down on the next slide. Then you must have the shipper who must also be on board and who must have some assured business. That means you must have a minimum rate, minimum yearly offtake, long-term contract, and assured year growth, which is linked up to the growth of the national economy. And finally, the builder has to have a good agreement with the agency who's the shipper on a long-term procurement and maintenance contract. It's one of the best documents I've seen in the DPL, which combines procurement and maintenance in one document, and the RFP was one figure, just one number. That was all that was required to sign off on one of India's best electric locomotives project. One number. That was wonderful. Something like that is what we need to look at to get that. So this is the slide that I told you, considering the emissions, the energy requirements, the cost aspect, bring down logistics, etc. It's very clear to anybody that if you do coastal, you're doing good, but it is only port to port. This is where Gati Shakti will come, where I can see first to last mile connectivity will be established. So we need to work together on this, right? Gati Shakti is moving on particular line. We need to work together to see that the last mile and first mile connectivity is also in place. So this is how the business case looks like. I put on that if you are looking at 6% share and go to 33% share as shown in the red arrow, you are looking at saving about 1,000 million rupees per year if you make this multimodal share from 6% to 33%. And of course, don't forget this will also save us a lot of on emissions and energy, the two things that we are internationally committed. So when we did this, we also did a requirement analysis for what the coastal cargo looks like of 2035. We're taking very conservative growth rates for coal manufacturing growth of 2%. This year it's much more than 2% already. Iron ore at 7.5%, bauxite, etc. So the actual the potential cargo in 2035 becomes 1,441 million tons, and not counting fuel and container MU. Next part of the story was, how do we lug this from? This is where we work together, and we froze the plan around 3 hull forms, a 26,000 ton, a 50,000 ton, and a 100,000 ton. looking at roughly 11 months of operations, 4 voyages in the year, which gave you a number close to the last number there, 1,353 ships at a cost of 160,000 crores over a 10-year period. This is what we need in actual terms and numbers to make our shipbuilding industry take. So then how do we build this? What is the build plan? Firstly, we must have standardized design specifications. I hope it is nothing like the ones that we have pulled out on the Inland Waterways Authority website. I think that wants to is the kind of design that is suggested there. The second part is, of course, I think many of my friends also spoke about get the supply chain in place, beginning with the marine diesels. We don't make marine diesels in India, and we must have very high technology marine diesel engines. Whether they are marine diesels or green hydrogen driven is a matter of choice. But let's look at marine diesels for the time being. Then have strategic partnership for ship construction. This is what we have discussed today. I'm not going to build it. Then make the strategic supply chain. We have to understand not everything can be built in India, and these are business discussions. So some of these things will have to be balanced on what we need to buy and what we need to make. And the most important part of building a sustainable supply chain is to move away from this batch production. You can't say, you build 3 ships, then you see it on. You make 1 aircraft carrier, come back after 10, we make 1 more. That way the supply chain will never get made, including propellers. Warship propellers we can't order because nobody knows you want 2 or you want 20 or you want 1. No idea. So we must not forget that we have to move away from this batch production model of ordering few ships at one go to a pipeline production model. This is how the US had done it when they did World War II. They spoke about the Liberty class. So there's some lessons we can learn from those systems, and this will build the supply chain in India, build the scale and size to support the ancillaries. So how do we? The second part of the problem is Swadeshi Punji, credit again. So we have now proposed that we have a national bank for shipbuilding and shipping development, and the funding is very simple. We just do what the NHAI has done for road transport. They put a cess of 1 lakh on petrol and some 50 paisa on diesel. That has given them enough money to build all highways in India. That's one of the ways that we are getting. All that we are here we are saying is that if you ship anything on FOB basis on any foreign ship, you pay me at 0.5% as my cess on that. And on $60 billion, 0.5% is a hell of a lot of money. And that money is going interest-free to this bank. And this bank should have no business to lend this money at anything more than 3 to 4%, covering about 1.5% for its operating costs and 2.5% as overhead on that. That's a very reasonable margin for any bank to work on. Then we spoke about the staple debt. This is the idea that we took from the IMF, where every RFP that is issued to any shipyard comes with the staple debt, where there's a clear understanding that the debt will be at 2% or 1.5% or whatever the NABS does, and to about 85 to 90% of the project cost value. Not in this complex methodology that we have now got for funding shipyards. Higher of this, lower of that, medium of that, if not anything else, some third party has to determine. No, it's a simple thing. You go ahead and do it. So this is what happens to the shipyards. We give the debt to the shipyard who makes this thing, sells it to the ship owner, who now gets a staple debt transferred to it. And the ship owner starts getting its revenues through the assured cargo that is guaranteed by the government agency, whether it's old fertilizer, so they become the cargo guarantor. The revenue stream starts coming in. I have now paid for it. You build the ship on credit. I have paid you for it. Now I'm going to pay you back through the capex route that's shown here. The same thing as spent out on more detail here, which is on how the OPEX is to be made. Same business of the long-term contract for carriage of the short cargo. So finally, of course, cabotage. At some stage, we must have a sunset clause in cabotage. We can't continue with this whole thing endlessly. At some stage, we have to tell them where they get off, and we have to make sure that future cargo is only carried on Indian ships. And we tell this well in time. We can't tell them at 8 o'clock in the evening that there is no cabotage. That won't work. So we'll have to say now. We set a date, whatever date. I put on 31 December 2026. Somebody might want 1st January 2027. That's a matter of detail. But the fact is that we need to announce to the whole world that first, this is it. Cabotage is stopped. Relaxation from so and so date. So how do we do this? As I mentioned, we make the bank, National Bank for Shipbuilding and Shipping Development, So it works for both the shipbuilders and the shipping community for all this thing. And I've told you that you can have 2,500 crores of money every year. That will fund easily about 40 to 50,000 ton ships to be built in India. So I don't think we can build it, but we can go for it. So how does this NAV SSB look like? It should have the mandate, should be very clear. There should be a control organization. There should be a professional management. The board of directors, key management, to get the right banking guys, shipping guys as part of the management and the direction team. It should be located in Mumbai and it should have branches where the shipbuilding community is. And probably budget and finance. Yeah. Right. So in this whole thing, we need to also review what has been said in the MIV 2030 and make some more ambitious targets. We must say that we want to do 33% modal share by 2035. Another motherhood statement. But at least in my motherhood statement, I have suggested some way to get close to that number. We may not get there, but let's set ourselves a tough target. As I learned from my earlier CEO at Procedural, unless you set tough targets, you're not likely to attain easy targets either. So let's start with some tough targets so we get somewhere in between. This is how we are saying on global share of ownership, Indian jobs, 21,000 seafaring. This has been all calculated. We can get all these numbers if we follow the plan that I've suggested. Then, so finally, what is the pedestal group? What should be our passage plan? First of all, you need more consultation with the industry stakeholders, who are the cargo aggregators, the guarantors, the shipbuilders, the shippers, the insurers, the charters, and figure out how to do all this in terms of the legal work, the documentation that is very tough. As far as winds and tides are concerned, we need to figure out what's against and what's for, and that is where a whole of nation approach becomes a strategic must. You need to do a lot of negotiations. These are not easy to do. And there will be a lot of pushback from the industry, from the ministries. We want to retain our independence on where we want to buy our grain and sell it to. And finally, it should be staged by some reasonable organization which has a multi-ministerial coordination sort of thing. And I have suggested here, but it can be an independent authority reporting to the cabinet secretary. And as far as the sailing part is concerned, proposed by the concerned ministry, where we actually spoke about at least within the ministry, at least a senior civil services officer should be held responsible for developing the shipbuilding industry in India. So this is where I think I finished my presentation, and thank you very much for this present hearing. I'll be very grateful to you.
Anyway, I have been hearing so many luminaries talking about shipbuilding that I really feel humbled to be able to speak about something. Perhaps you all know I'm a teacher and I don't really have the practical shipbuilding experience. But all the same, I would dare to speak my views, and let's see how it goes. I had shared my screen. What happened to it? Yeah. I represent an organization which is called Forum for River and Ocean Scientists and Technologists. We are a group of professionals who have formed this forum, and we talk mainly about anything connected with waterways. That is both inland waterways, lakes and lagoons, and also coastal waterways and oceans. So I was requested to talk on Indian shipbuilding the way ahead. And I have prepared a few slides. Maybe they will be of interest. India, as the morning our keynote speaker mentioned, India has a maritime trading history since perhaps 5,000 years to 6,000 years. Mohenjo-daro was 2,500 to 3,000 years before Christ. Wooden ships were built and traded in high seas from the Malabar coast, from Konkan coast, from Gujarat coast, from Coromandel coast, and from Kalinga coast to almost all over the world in the Asiatic region, that is to West Asia, to East Africa, to Southeast Asia and Far East. Indian ships are known to have been trading with China since long time. Wooden shipbuilding is a traditional art, and this skill has been passed down the line through generations. Particular note must be made. One important aspect I wanted to bring out in this, that the ports flourished on river mouths and banks, perished when the river changed its course or got silted. New ports formed, and shipbuilding and shipping continued without a break till the beginning of 20th century. In other words, people really didn't bother whether there is a port or not. They just made a port. Whenever the river changed its course, people just made a port, made a shipbuilding yard, made ships, built ships, and proceeded with trading in the Far Eastern and Southeastern and Southwestern countries. This is something which is unique and must be understood. There are no fixed ports. Steel shipbuilding started in the early 20th century, saw the advent of steel shipbuilding and ship repair in this country, particularly in Kolkata and then in Mumbai. Shipbuilding and repair industry grew as the demand increased due to increased trade between England and India. This got a further boost during the Second World War. During this period, welding replaced riveting in shipbuilding. Indian workers grew in skill levels to tackle changing scenarios in the shipbuilding technology. It must be noted with pride that after independence, these workers only were instrumental in building a robust shipbuilding industry, which did not grow as expected. I say robust because the first ships that were built in this country was also a good ship. So right from the time of independence, shipbuilding quality has not deteriorated. But however, shipbuilding industry hasn't improved. This is very well known. CSL was established in 1972. This was a post-independent shipyard, and now it has built the newest aircraft. It's done very well. Mazandok Limited is 250 years old or so, and a major defense yard. GRAC, established in 1884, taken over by government in 1960. CIWTC, Central Inland Water Transport Corporation, formerly Harappan Company, was taken over by GRAC. This was a shipyard next to the GRAC, but unfortunately it couldn't survive. It merged. HSL, established in 1941 by India Steam Navigation Company, taken over by government in 1952 and transferred to MOD in 2010, primarily because its merchant shipbuilding history was not encouraging. Goa Shipyard, established by Portuguese in 1957, taken over by MOD in 1967. Other central and government shipyards, SDPE, now with CSL, Shalimar Works, still doddering. For shipbuilding to improve, we have heard a lot from the previous sector, so I don't know how much it is important to talk about, but however, I'll talk about this. In 1971, ship pricing policy was established by the government, and shipbuilding subsidy policy was applicable only to HSL and CSL, no other private shipyard nor government shipyard. In 2002, shipbuilding subsidy policy was applicable to all shipyards except defense yards. Contracts signed for ships till 14th August 2007 through global tendering were eligible for subsidy. 30% of the bid price was subsidy. Applicable to commercial vessels of length more than 80 meters. Budgetary provisions was made till 2013-14 and later extended till 2020-21. But one has to remember that the shipbuilding subsidy of this generation, 2002, stopped in 2007. So ships which are ordered and keels were laid after 2007 were not eligible for shipbuilding subsidy. Only those ships whose keel was laid prior to 2007 were eligible, and they got their subsidy till 2020-21. Stoppage of shipbuilding policy subsidy subsequently could have been a major cause for decline of collapse of many private shipyards in 2007-8. Today, shipbuilding financial assistance policy includes, it's valid for contracts signed between 1st April 2016 to 31st March 2026, valid for all commercial ships built in India of length more than 80 meters, subsidy of 20% of contractual price to be paid to the shipbuilder. The subsidy is to be reduced by 3% every 3 years. Ships built and delivered within 3 years of contract signing. Ships must be built and delivered within 3 years of contract signing. Shipyard capacity expansion is to be from its own resources. So there are 2 or 3 things that are important here. One, government is giving a subsidy of 20% starting from 2016, and it is to be reduced by 3% every 3 years. That means over the 10-year period, there will be a 10% reduction in subsidy. That means it is expected that shipyard will improve its performance and it will have a better cost control. Shipyard capacity expansion is to be from its own resources. That means government is not going to fund anymore for infrastructure development in shipyards. To encourage shipbuilding in India, government has further issued Shipping Directive 2020. That cabotage things have been discussed earlier, so I'll drop that. If you look at ships on order, in this diagram, this pie chart, you'll see that most of the orders are bulk carriers and tankers, and you have container ships, passenger ships, and general cargo ships. In this scenario, if you look at the Indian order book position for commercial ships, in July 2022 was 132,000 CGT, or roughly 0.2% of the total international order book position. This is the real situation. And this is talking about these common ships, tankers, bulk carriers, container ships, general cargo ships, and passenger ships. This lack of order book position was primarily because orders being booked by naval vessels. So there was no capacity of building more vessels. India could not compete with China, Japan, and Korea with regard to cost and delivery schedule. So there are 2 aspects. I mean, one is that shipyards had naval vessels order, and the other was that the cost and delivery periods were not competitive with others. But during this period of 50, 60, 70 years, India has built liquefied gas carriers, though a small one that runs in Cochin, liquefied ammonia gas carrier, small high performance vehicle again in Cochin, which are running in the Cochin metro, coastal research vessels, building across the seas in India and across the coast, tugs, fishing trawlers, and a number of passenger vessels flying between Indian mainland and Andaman, and also around Andaman Islands and Lakshadweep Islands. Now, if you leave out those ships of 5 types which I discussed in the last listing, you can see here that Korea has received orders of 49% of the total LNG fired ships. LNG fired ships. That means the main engine is fired by LNG. It's not LNG carrying ships. They could be LNG carrying ships, but along with LNG carrying ships which have LNG fired engines, other ships that are also fired by LNG engines. Korea has got 49% of the order. Korea has obtained order for 60% of the total eco-friendly ships. What is an eco-friendly ship? Eco-friendly ship is one in which the diesel oil is mixed with other kinds of oil, reducing carbon emission, and also auxiliary propulsion devices such as wind power and solar power uses. Also, eco-friendly ships would include hydrogen powered ships. So by July 2022, Korean shipyards have received a total order even larger than the Chinese order. In this scenario, India has built INS Vikrant, order placed in 2004 on Cochin Shipyard Limited, ships launched in 2013 and finally commissioned on 2022. This is our glory. We can build very sophisticated ships. That is not questioned anymore. That's why I brought out this slide. INS Vikrant means that Indian shipbuilder can build really sophisticated ships. Status of Indian shipbuilding. Why is Indian commercial shipbuilding in such a state? We have got our favored tradition, skill, capacity to quickly assimilate new skill, and apparently supportive government. But still, our cost control is poor and delivery time is large, so we get a very limited market share. These are the main two items. Cost is high and our delivery period is not within contractual. Our contractual delivery period itself is high, plus we cannot deliver within the contractual delivery. We have a large and profitable defense shipbuilding industry. What have we learned from this? If we have today, Cochin Shipyard, Mazagon Dock, and Garni Shipbuilders and Goa Shipyard show a profit in their financial statements. Therefore, I say that defense shipbuilding industry has been a profitable shipbuilding industry in our country today. I have put three major reasons for this. In-house and successful design establishment. We have heard about the naval design establishment so well today. So a good design establishment which supports ship construction is an essential item for good shipbuilding. Value addition to the steel structure of a ship. If you look at any naval vessels cost breakup, perhaps large amount will go to equipments. So when you have a large value addition, your profit automatically goes up. And then third item, which is very important, is a very alert owner. The owner partners the shipbuilder. What do you call this? The naval system is there now. You have an office in each shipyard where you partner with the shipbuilder to build a good ship. Very few ship owners, private ship owners would do this in the commercial shipbuilding practice. I think these three are the main reasons. Can we do something about this? Learn something from it. Design effort. I'll talk about design effort. There have been comments in this seminar that India does not have the design know-how. Until today, India is importing designs. That I'm objecting to, and I'm bringing before you facts that are necessary to know. A close interaction between designer and builder can reduce a lot of difficulties faced during construction. That is reduction of rework, better performance prediction, timely delivery, and better system engineering approach. Have designs purchased from abroad been flawless? Are designers available for consultation and advice during construction? Any foreign design, we learned today that we buy designs. If you buy a commercial design, is the designer available for discussion or for advice during the construction or delivery? I don't think they are available. NSDRC was a design house owned and established by the government in 1987, and it worked till 2009. Apart from many other design activities, it successfully designed a number of passenger vessels, small and big, for Andaman administration. And perhaps most of you will remember the successful completion of Kalighat vessel, which was left half done in the Hooghly dock. A number of research vessels for NIOT. NIOT has been a strong client of NSDRC, and NSDRC has helped it build up its research vessels successfully. In fact, research vessel team, I would say. Then there is the small crafts for tourism, sports, wood and FRP, steel, aluminum, high-speed vessels, mostly cater to national needs, would also be export-oriented. There are 2 or 3 things I want to bring to your notice. One is, can we build value-added ships? This item, which is, you see a conventional ship's equipment cost is about purchased material cost, including steel, is about 60 to 65%, and 35 to 40% is all other costs. And whatever success you have in production, your profit margin would not be more than 10%. And this 10% goes down subject to international competition. When you build a value-added ship, the 65% goes up to 75%. So the remaining cost is 25%. Therefore, your profit margin, even if it is 10%, you are getting a 10% profit over 75% of the material cost also. And that is a good increase in your profit level. Then there is a large demand for inland cargo and passenger vessels of steel, mostly limited to national competition. Now, why is it that when government decides to do something, it can really do very well, like building defense ships? But why cannot the government decide to build inland cargo vessels and passenger vessels to move in our rivers? It can be only talked about, but what is the incentive the government gives for building Indian cargo vessels? Small crafts, of course, there are a lot of small craft builders. Then ship production, if you look at ship production, some salient features of ship production, I am sure all of the audience will be knowing about this. Ships are custom built. Today, marine platforms are of varied types. Marine platforms are technology intensive, different skill sets. Work environment is harsh. Shipbuilding comes under the category of heavy industries having strategic importance. Such construction is a combination of construction and assembly. Quality check is required at all stages of construction. And the most important item of ship production is system integration. How good is your system integration? What does Indian shipbuilding suffer from? I've listed some names, some items, but I am sure that today we have talked so much about subfronts of Indian shipbuilding, particularly naval ships. Okay, delay due to supply items. Decision-making process for equipment is slow. Follow-up with vendor and subcontractor is slow. That which shipbuilder generally doesn't follow up with the vendor and subcontractor on a regular basis. Only when the item is about to come, he rings up, is my item ready, can it be shipped? Rework required for maintaining quality. Normally, all departments are notionally walled without communication with each other. This is a typical scenario of Indian shipyards where all departments remain within themselves. You ask a young man with about 10 years experience in shipyard working in a particular office, a particular shop, he will tell you everything about that shop. But if you ask him what is happening in the next shop, he will say, I don't know. So what happens is system integration becomes difficult because people don't realize what their working effort will be on the next shop and things like that. Similar thing happens, lack of communication between external stakeholders during the shipbuilding process, that is the builder departments, ship owner, class, vendors, and government bodies. Because of this, system integration is poor. Technically, and also there is no integration with production. No financial integration with production, no cost control, no cash flow control. This is the sad state of Indian shipbuilding today. What can be done? Hello? Yeah. If a yard wants to build value-added ships, an essential requirement is sound knowledge base, which should be continuously upgraded with new technologies. Now this, I don't think shipbuilder himself will understand very well, but I feel that if you want to really build value-added ships, if you want to build LNG ships, LNG-fired ships, the knowledge at least the theoretical knowledge of LNG fired ships must be available in the shipyard. It's not enough saying that you have an LNG cylinder and you feed it to the engine and it will fire and go. No, it should be more than that. It should be details. As one would know, God lies in details. So can shipyard make provisions for reading technical material? I have gone to many shipyards. When I ask somebody, do you find time to read the technical literature? He says, no, sir, we're working till about 8 p.m. every day, including a Saturday and sometimes also on Sunday. So where is the time? Now, unfortunately, I feel that shipyards must make an effort towards getting technical material and asking their officers and staff to read and upgrade their knowledge. It can also organize short-term courses, and this should be applicable to officers and traders. Advanced skill training. When a young man goes into a shipyard, he is sent from department to department on a monthly basis for a year, and that is how he learns about shipbuilding, but he learns nothing. You ask any youngster with a one-year experience in shipyard, he will say, yeah, I'm posted in this shop and I'm working there. That's all, I'm learning this work. But if you have a shipbuilding simulation software, then he could learn shipbuilding on his own. There is no such software in existence. Normally, like the engine simulator trains the marine engineer to work on an engine, if a shipbuilder can be trained on a shipbuilding software, simulation software, he can do a better shipbuilding activity in his own yard. In fact, he can learn much quicker than what he would learn in a long period of time. Communication system improvement. This is something I was shocked to hear the other day, that the small vendors, people who make these blocks, steel blocks, and also ancillary, I hope it will apply to MSMEs and ancillaries, that the communication with the builder is very poor and the cash flow is a major problem. If we're talking of small vendors, MSMEs, and entrepreneurs, then one must remember they have a cash flow problem. It is not they're rich in cash and they will deliver the goods and then they will get the money. Also, they don't have time for training. So it is, can the builder take the vendors as partners? Can the builder communicate with the builder in a manner that he can train them and he can understand his cash flow problems and he can side with him in solving his problem and getting the product back from him? I think this is an essential item which is really lacking in our country, that communication between small vendors and builder. There is no boss and servant here. All are partners. You cannot say this is bad, take it back. That kind of attitude doesn't work. So I think communication is a very important tool. In an age when human-to-human contact is required to be reduced on the shop floor because of COVID, of course, I've written this sentence in the aftermath of COVID. It is essential that an advanced computer system for in an age when human-to-human contact is required to be reduced in the shop floor, it is essential that an advanced computer system for supplying not only the technical details, but also the work in progress on a real-time basis, digitization and digitalization, including IoT, cloud computing, AI and machine learning, edge computing and cybersecurity, etc., must be applied. Okay, we have been hearing today that there is a lot of digitization and a lot of work being done in the naval ship design, this thing. But what about digitalization? How much of communication between different organizations in the same digital model is done? Can the vendor and the builder and the owner, builder and the government body, can all these be under a digitalized system of digital information, including perhaps the advanced stage would be AI and machine learning. So my suggestion is that digitalization must be done. That is, everybody must be networked together so that any information that is generated in one place should be automatically transmitted to the other required places. Of course, one must remember cybersecurity is very important. But this is not something which is insurmountable. System integration, we have talked about it. A ship as a whole unit has to be built in concurrent manner and not on a sequential basis. Digitalization helps. Procurement, order placing, procurement, and installation. Decision-making process would greatly be enhanced if we could have a digital twin of shipbuilding process, helping to do PLM, product life cycle management from the concept stage till delivery and perhaps beyond. So finally, we come to the theme of this session: can government policy help? As far as I understood, till now, government has only talked of financial subsidy. This is necessary, but not adequate. Could there be different incentive schemes for value-added ships and inland water vessels, apart from those that is given for general ships like bulk carriers, tankers, cargo ships, and container vessels? Can value-added ships be incentivized so that shipyards are encouraged to build value-added ships? Apart from naval vessels, I'm not talking of naval vessels, I'm talking of commercial vessels which are value-added in nature, like those where I have already mentioned. And if we are really interested in inland water transport, we should give some incentive to inland water vessels which may be less than 80 meters, but built by smaller yards. That is very important, I think. Could there be some encouragement to ancillary industries and MSMEs? This has been talked a great deal, and I'm sure that nothing is required to be explained in this. Could the government support major multi-institutional development projects such as shipbuilding simulation, digital twin for shipbuilding, and encourage innovation? We have heard that the Navy has its establishments for supporting defense equipment innovation. Navy also has a major DRDO establishment which does innovational work and designs, helps in indigenization. Is there anything in commercial shipbuilding for this? I don't think so. NSDRC was there in some extent, but now it is closed. It is not there, simply nothing is there. People have talked about R&D being very little in this country. Design effort being very little in this country. Why? Is the knowledge base inadequate? If this knowledge base was inadequate, is the same set of people how people are building naval vessels? No, sir. It is not the knowledge base. It's the effort, it's the desire. When Europeans, Americans, Chinese, and Koreans can have national-based R&D projects with multi-institutional involvement, classification societies, research institutions, educational institutions, etc. Why can't we have? Can anybody name a project which is multi-institutional for shipbuilding? It's not there. I am suggesting two projects here: shipbuilding simulation and digital twin for shipbuilding, which should be supported by government in a major way and supplied to shipyards once it is through. I also want the government policy to support innovation in commercial shipbuilding. We don't have a DRDO. Maybe we don't have an organization, but some organization can be entrusted to encourage innovation with some amount of cash input. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
I'm going to ask two questions provocative questions perhaps, because we covered a whole gamut of things. One is the Indian ship owners get foreign practices from
foreign built, right?
the Indian ship owners, it is said, do not have fire in the belly.
Is this correct?
Buying, selling.
And the second, the smaller shipyards have been having that the orders for commercial ships are being forcibly given to the public sector, and the private sector, commercial ships are not getting the chance. In fact, I have strong private smaller shipyards.
Very interesting questions. First one, as far as ownership of Indian ships are concerned, by the review of maritime transport 2021, 38% of So on this whole thing, there are issues about structures. One of the things that we managed to see was that the fair cost of the by citing the aviation company. That's all we managed to do. The aviation were you put on one of aviation at 5%. That's another challenge there. The second part of this is the question of in terms of ship owners trying to buy ships. Nobody's going to put any money in unless it has visibility on the revenue. We can give them the visibility on the revenue stream, and we tell them, look, this is the cargo you're going to carry every year of 1.4 billion tons of cargo by 2025. All my investors are using, and I'm not going to be sleeping at night trying to get the small vessels at 1.4 billion tons of cargo. That would put a lot of cargo carried. That will also put a lot of fire in LNG and other private sectors. Second part is about reluctance to build.
Can you start your video?
I think the problem there is again the same.
That's just in between. So just start your video. Just give one more try after the question answer.
We are still not ready. Still not
finishes. Just again try. And just start your video. Unmute your video.
Import all that here, make it here, and then I'm not stuck. I'm going to catch engine on board. Just wait
a second.
There are complexities of the long-term aspect of ownership. Total cost. Not just the one-off purchase price involved. The total cost of ownership, unless we put these schemes in place, this total cost of ownership of people who allow building in India is somewhat daunting. Possible.
I think we have a few minutes for questions from the audience. So suggested in the presentation, I would request give us questions to raise their hand, to give their name so that it's recorded, and to debrief their. Yes. Can we give him a mic, please?
For those very interesting presentations. My question is to Comrade Sanagas. A very, very comprehensive picture of where we are now and where we should be. But given where we are now, everything is in single-digit percentages. What is the sort of time frame you're looking at to achieve what sort of achievable objective where at least if not, which is not ideal, but could be acceptable? And this I'm asking in relation to something, we quoted the maritime vision now, 2030. We used to have a maritime agenda, 2010 to 2020. Part of that got subsumed into Sagarmala in 2015. But at the end of 2020, what had been achieved was far, far short of what had been desired in the agenda in 2010.
So what you guys talking about now? That by 2030 maritime vision or Sagarmala 2035, we will be where we want to be. And from that comes my third question. Most of the things we expect will be done by the very people who have not been able to do it for 75 years. So what will bring about that transformation? My question. Thank you. We've been discussing this for some time. Ultimately, the point is, everything has a tipping point. So in our case, we are at a stage in our country's history where we are at a tipping point, where we have only one direction to go. That is all. So until now, we were ambivalent, the entire person. Today we have a direction, and we have already some of the building blocks are in place, and more of the building blocks will be done. There's also some institutional changes that have happened in government which have probably facilitated many of these things done. But finally, as I said, this whole thing, if I put a number 2035, like every 2035, we are still where we are, or maybe one step behind what we were there in itself. The point is that what I'm trying to bring out here is that no one ministry can do this. Shipbuilding is a government thing, which is a whole of nation. And to that extent, we need to sort of put those building blocks as of those three major. You must have cargo, you must have credit, and you must do away with capital. These three things are the first principles. And the second principle that I mentioned is Atmanirbhar vantage. So that does this to give you Atmanirbhar. Both Myanmar. That is the formula. Now, to get the capital out of the way, to get the credit structures, please, I have mentioned to you, and these numbers are verified. We are spending $60 billion paying foreign companies to carry our cargo. What is 0.5% cess on campus? So we got the money, just free to the bank, and we should be able to give that money to ship owners and shipyards. That should be coordinated. So at least you're taking care of the credit. Last part is the cargo. Now, the cargo exists in this country. We have made a project of almost 1.5 billion tons of cargo to be moved if the objective of 33% taken up. Okay, we won't take 1.5. That's a five-fold increase from today. And that itself will give you a mix of challenges that you need to work on. And all these things will also work because you create the scale and size to set up the landscape that you're making problems in the main engines in India or whatever else that comes to mind. I don't know, window wipers or something. But all these things are only possible for industry to participate in if there's visibility on revenues, if there's scale and size. So that's my sense of optimism. And if you have to go to the fourth largest economy and the second largest economy by 2047, you have to get there on something. That something is probably ships.
Anybody else?
So you talked about stapled deck. I really grasp that what is the national gain and how the funding is going to happen for the.
This is a concept that we had borrowed from projects which is what happens is there is that in the RHP itself, we use a debt equity. That means, for example, there's a ship building contract for estimated value of 500 crores. Then the stapled debt agreement gives cash to your itself. That you as the shipbuilder know that you're going to get financed at whatever 3% or 4% or whatever, and how much will it cost. So the government gives you the debt together with the order.
Basically, assured financing is there.
Assured financing, and that is for the shipyard. Now for the shipper, for the ship owner, we give the same thing to him. Here's the stapled debt. This is your cargo. From your OPEX to service the debt, and as far as the shipyard is concerned, the shipyard services debt from the revenue it runs from the ship owners. This is the concept. So everybody is clear that this project, my debt is going to be at 5% or 4% or whatever X%. And how will it be funded and how will it be serviced?
Is it still at formulation stage or it's been implemented?
No, many countries in the world, India, we haven't done. Maybe in some highways projects, we got that. I can't remember offhand, but some of these projects we've done.
Is just a proposal stage or it's going
it's a conceptual state. No, certainly not with the Ministry of Shipbuilding. And this project is proposal went to Shipbuilding, Ministry of Shipping in 2020. So they also asked the same question. We explained that, but I don't think we have issued an RFP with state related to it. So we need to have the right banking institution to support it.
Just one small observation. I visited Korea Bombay shipyard in 2015, and just for the statistics, they had 11 dry docks at that point of time, and they are delivering 120 ships per year. That's the kind of, and as we all know that the shipyard was started in 1970 years. Our shipyards are now. The presentation that they gave it to us was clearly highlighted that it is not possible without the government policies and support structure which is existing. Now we are in the think tank, we are discussing all these issues. Power that be from the government sector, are they here? Or in some manner, do we have mechanism to pass on this our findings to them, so that as a nation we must contribute to Samadhan, excellent presentation. So can we really pass on this kind of ideas? What is the framework that
Thank you for that observation. Any other questions? Yes, I see two more hands there. Yeah.
I want to ask, are there any plans to make any battery operated ships? Because battery operated ship will be free of emission. Then for smaller ranges in the port and coast, they can be operated. For Coast Guard patrol vessels, for Navy patrol vessels, and for ASW ships. That is the future to go, because you have to reduce emission.
See, as part of the other work that I do, I also belong to the sustainability business on recycling. I have a big issue with electric propulsion. So, while you might have the immediate benefit of electric propulsion locally, for an economy which is primarily deriving its power from coal-based power plants, you are actually displacing the source of pollution. Ultimately, your total emissions are on the rise. So, you have to build those batteries, and charging those batteries requires you to take power, and that's how it's coal-based power plants. So, certainly, as far as alternative energy sources for powering these ships are concerned, we are already working on a project on green hydrogen that is going to come into renewable energy sources, using a mix of fuel cells, electrolysis, and ETS plants that will give you a combination of hydrogen, oxygen, and ammonia. Now, ammonia is a far more stable fuel. So, in the future, we'll see potentially engines that will be running on hydrogen as the green fuel. But I'm not a great supporter of electric batteries.
I think I'm going to add to that and give a different view. Yes, it is a fact that anything from run on electricity derives its energy from fossil fuels. But the issue is one of point source of pollution versus dispersed source of pollution. And a point source of pollution can be better controlled than a dispersed source of pollution. And just for information, there is a commercial passenger ship of 26 passengers, which is being operated commercially in the backwaters of Kerala. It was built by a company run by the government of Kerala. And its operational cost is just 35 paisa per nautical mile. So there are initiatives, and there are initiatives to, I think it's very useful for example, ecotourism. If you're going to the mud volcano in Andamans, you're having a boat ride on Paikara Lake or on the Lake Chilka Lake. I think one should start there, but I'm very clear that yes, amount of fossil fuel use is the same, but it's the source of pollution which is manageable in one case and not so manageable in the other. Yes.
So my question again is, thank you for that presentation and interesting analysis. You mentioned that India ranks 18th registry and that we pay $58 billion to foreign ships for carrying Indian cargo. Now, whether the owners to register a ship in India or not, it's about how attractive Indian registry is. As you mentioned, 28% of those ship owners are Indian ship owners carrying, but foreign flags. So, at the first place, why is it a concern? And how building 1,400 ships, as you mentioned, plan will address this concern if at all is a concern?
So, at the very outset, $60 billion is not a small amount of money.
It's going to be Indian owners. Many of them are Indian owners.
$60 billion that we pay are to foreign companies carrying Indian cargo.
Those companies owned by Indians?
No, foreign companies. Only about in the middle of 80s, exim cargo, we call it as exim cargo, used to be about 46% carried on Indian owned and Indian flag ships. They are at about 6.5%. That means that 94% of Indian cargo is carried on foreign hull ships, for which the number is $58 billion a year, is what we pay for shipping charges. Why should we pay that?
It is about making Indian residents higher, so that the ships get registered in India. It is not about building ships. Because even if you build ships, they will get registered absolutely.
They can be registered here, just to give you an example. I think you've got a very valid point. In the example that I quoted for the long-term procurement and maintenance contract by the Ministry of Education for a railway engine program, it was a very simple thing. We want 100 locomotives a year. You produce 150, you export 250. So here also we are saying, if you want to do 1,500 ships or 1,440 ships that we have calculated on a particular site, can differ. You can change your 50,000 to whatever 60,000 and 60,000 in something else. Those numbers have been derived by working with the Indian my friend here as to what would be the powering requirement and how the modular propulsion packages fit the marine engine specification, so that you don't have to have a wide diversity of marine engines to be powering all these things. But to come back to you, $60 billion is what I would like to pay Indian shippers to, rather than pay to Maersk and whatever else are there in the world. That's the point. So that money should be saved. That's the foreign exchange.
Yeah, I think the discussion can continue, but we have to bring it to a close at some point. It's been a very long session, so I'm going to, for the sake of recording, just recap on the 5 presentations. We had Commodore Tiwari, who had a case study, who presented a case study of Korea and China, and focused on the need for financial reforms, development of science and technology, and manufacturing, and having dedicated shipbuilding institutions. And Commander Sirajuddin focused on the vendor base, the need to develop a very robust and reliable vendor base, whereas Captain Mishra highlighted the need for integrated indigenization, reduce procedural complexities, promote collaboration, and create a competitive edge among the shipyards. Professor Mishra highlighted the need to focus on value-added ships and different vessels, but once again, systems integration with advanced skill, which includes training in digital twin and shipbuilding simulation software. And Commodore Samadar, of course, it was filled with so much information that I think we need an evening to look at it. But some things that I could say was implication of outsourcing cargo to foreign shipping on not just the outflow of forex, but also on security matters, and need for standard designs, importance of assured cargo, no shipbuilding. That's the equation that I have. So I would like to thank each one of the panelists for their commitment and serious, intensive presentation. I think we all agree that shipbuilding has to be promoted in India, and we are discussing how to go about it. These capabilities do not develop overnight. And I can assure you that even policy reforms are not a magic wand. Having been in government for 35 years, there is policy reforms, and there is policy implementation.
there is no dearth of ideas, as we can see from the startups. We are the, I think, the fourth largest startups, and it's not just ordinary startups. We are having unicorn startups. So there's no dearth of ideas, but how do we actually nurture, mentor, and support these projects? And before I close, I'd like to just share 4 points that can, just thoughts, which come from many of the presentations so far. One is we talk about clusters. We have to be very clear. It would be very advisable to be clear on what we call clusters. Because clusters is a generic term which is thrown around. And if we are looking at maritime clusters only for manufacturing, or are we looking at maritime clusters on the Norway mode, which is basically research, training, education, as well as manufacturing. And incidentally, we have a maritime cluster that as DG Shipping, we had kick-started and capitalized in Goa, and it's called the Konkan Maritime Cluster. Now, if we could, we need the industry and the Navy and everybody to support them, because without support, they cannot grow. It will just go flat. Any cluster needs to be supported. Otherwise, it will just remain a group of industries which will go to rot after a few years. The second one is partnerships and collaboration. I think every single speaker spoke about collaboration. This is the era of collaboration. What is the kind of partnerships we need? And one of the proposals I had made, to the Vice Admiral was, Navy is talking about economies of scale. We're talking about in-house design capabilities. We can't have capabilities just within the Navy. These kind of clusters and capabilities are built on India basis. It has to be both Navy as well as private sector. So can we start with a tangible, doable partnership between the Navy and the IMU campus at Visakhapatnam, which offers courses in naval architecture and ocean technology. This was the design center previously. Maybe we can even revive the design center by certain collaborations. Now, yes, we have in-house design capabilities, but I must share, one example of one feedback that I got from a private company. They said they hired the best naval architect. The person was extremely good, asked to do a piece of work. The work was done perfectly well, superb. But that company needed to modify the design a little bit. And when the professional was asked to modify it, it was a disaster because the professional forgot to, ensure that the entrance to the door, they had to shift the door this way. And there is nobody, you have to actually crawl over the door. So the outcome of this is we have graduates, we have postgraduates who are very good. It's very classroom oriented and it is very exam oriented. By this participation and interaction, perhaps they can be opened up to more application of mind and what does the industry want, actually understand what the industry wants. Incidentally, we also have an incubation center which is started in the IMF campus of Chennai. So that could be one thing where you slowly start developing S&T and R&D. A third one that I thought is the shipbuilding financial assistance. Now we are talking about vendors. When we talk about MSMEs, we are talking only about vendors. That's one part of it. But there are MSMEs who have shipyards. In fact, I visited a shipyard in Goa, which is in 4 acres, and was building aluminum ships for the shapes of UAE. And they are telling that this financial assistance is not beneficial for them for some reason. The profit margin is very low and the process is very slow. Perhaps a study group of IMF can actually take this up and see, because it will be a third-party assessment. It won't be internal. To see what is making it so adverse that they are not picking up this subsidy. The money is not sufficient, that's one thing, but the amount that is given by the government of India is not getting picked up by MSMEs. And the bigger ones won't need this money, or they may not need it right now. That's number 3. And number 4, my last point is, can there be a conclave of Navy and maritime entrepreneurs? Because we talk about vendor development, a robust vendor development, which could be supplier of spare parts, supplier of ordinary category C, category C star, but it could also be entrepreneurs in different areas. There are maritime professionals who turned entrepreneurs. One of them is actually Captain Nikunj Parashar, who's working for the Navy. I mean, in the sense, he's got projects. I think these are drone projects for the Navy. So there are people coming up, but they need hand-holding, they need some confidence building, and perhaps bringing them together on a conclave will be one extension of, you know, an outcome of this seminar or conference. So with these thoughts, thank you for the patience for listening to me, and thank you for having given me an opportunity to moderate this. And once again, I thank everybody for their patience and the speakers, especially for the meetings. Thank you.